Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Improv Network podcast. This is a series of conversations aimed at making stronger connections throughout the improv community. I'm James Quesada. I'm your education director for the Improv Network. You can go to theimprovnetwork.org to check out all sorts of resources, interviews, and blogs. There's a dedicated improv FAQ tab on the website where you can check out full archive of these conversations, as well as mini lectures by yours truly about improv topics, more bite-sized looks at the frequently asked questions of improv. And I am solo hosting today. My cohort, Bob Wick, it is his anniversary weekend, and Eagle Eye viewers may notice that I seem a little out of place here with the fireplace in the background. I am actually traveling for a wedding in Traverse City, and just before I started Traverse City, Michigan, and just before I started the show, I went to go check to see where Bob was so I could give everyone an update at the top of the show. And it turns out, I didn't realize this, but Bob is also celebrating his anniversary in Traverse City. And right now, I think he's on his way to the Sleeping Bear Dunes, but I didn't even know that. So Bob and I could have been hanging out in Traverse City at some point during the weekend, but instead here I am alone, and coincidentally in the same city while I'm in town from New York. I am very excited to talk to our guest for this episode. He is a longtime improviser and instructor, speaker, and best-selling author from Wall Street Journal and USA Today. He actually has a new book just released this past spring called The Playmaker's Mindset, and he is the owner of the Players Workshop, longest existing school of improv, and revived by our guest. And it is, without further ado, Jeff Rogers. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks
Jeff,
for having me on, James. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I'm very, very excited to talk to you about all sorts of things we have on our list of stuff we want to chat about. But best place to start is probably with you and the Players Workshop. Can you give us a little bit of history on what the Players Workshop is? Because it goes back quite a while, and it's maybe not as well known as things like Second City or IO.
Yeah, it absolutely it does go back, and it is not as well known.
Unfair. Do justice.
It's really funny because I was reading Improv Nation. I was looking through Improv Nation again last night, and the book by oh God, his name Wesson.
Yeah, Sam. I think it's Sam Wesson.
Yeah. So, and I was looking through it, and there's two references to Players Workshop, and I was just sitting there reading this thing, and I got to tell you, I am going to raise a stink about that.
Please.
I've decided. So, Players Workshop was started by a woman by the name of Josephine Forsberg. Joe Forsberg was part of the original cast at Second City in 1959 with the original show. She was also pregnant at the time, and she actually gave birth to her son Eric the opening night of Second City. So wow. not on stage. You know, she
seems like a missed opportunity.
You know what? Back in the day, I don't think they were thinking, the layers that they could play with that. Yeah. So she's not as known as some of that original cast, but she was there. She helped build the theater. She helped manage the theater. She really became an acolyte of Viola Spolin. And Viola was teaching at Second City. And when we say teaching, she was showing them the games.
Okay.
Right. And it was not so much a, constructed classes as much as she was demonstrating, here's the games, here's how you play the games, and coaching them. I think coaching would be a better kind of, terminology for what she was doing there. Don't get me wrong. She was obviously the progenitor of all of these kind of exercises and constantly exploring how to do it and all of these things. She did that for a few years. And Joe was at her side the entire time, learning how to teach it, learning what the games are, and really helping her put together everything. And then Viola left. I mean, she left in like the mid to early 60s, right? So she's gone to LA and New York, and she's doing other things. And so it fell to Joe to teach all of these actors who were coming in how to improvise, because it just wasn't being taught otherwise. I mean, you have improvisation in other acting forms, right? Stanislavski and the method, and they use them in different ways. But this was all about doing it for comedic purpose, right? And for authentic portrayal of characters on stage. So after a few years of doing that, in 1970, what was happening was at Second City, so it started in 1959, right? 1969, 1970, what was happening, the actors who were getting trained at Second City were bringing their friends who were also actors, saying, you got to learn this form. This is more than just, jokes and ha-has. This is a really dynamic form of producing incredible content, really putting together some great characters very quickly, and it can help in everything you're doing as a performer. So this started growing exponentially, and Joe went to Bernie Sahlins and said, listen, I think we need to expand the school and make this a whole real thing. Bernie Sahlins, who was the producer and one of the founders of Second City, said no. And no, wow. I'm not going to do that. That's my Bernie.
I wouldn't know. I'm like, that's probably perfect, I'm sure.
Spot on. For anybody who doesn't know Bernie, that was amazeballs. For anybody who does, I gotta know.
Yeah.
So she asked permission to spin off a school that would be standalone from Second City, but call it Players Workshop of Second City. Right. Yeah. And so the idea was you could take classes there and then go to Second City and audition and say, hey, I'm trained at Players Workshop, so I know how to do this. Can I audition? Well, that school became the first original independent school, because not only were they getting other actors and everything else, they were getting lawyers and accountants and a lot of marketing and advertising people. And, anybody who wanted to take a class that kind of expanded their abilities, this is where they came to take that class. And what happened was, over the years, that continued on. I mean, they had like 10,000 students over the years originally. And so in the late 80s, Andrew Alexander took over Second City. He bought Second City from Bernie Sahlins and saw what kind of numbers Players Workshop was doing and said, hey, we should be doing that. That's an opportunity for us. That's a missed opportunity. So what he did was he recruited the main, so Joe taught her kids how to do it, Josephine and Linnea, Joe taught Eric and Linnea, her two kids, how to teach it. She also taught several people in her family how to teach it, one of them being her nephew, who was a performer, Martin DeMott. Now, you say the name Martin DeMott, everybody should know Martin's name, but if not, he was a really influential teacher. Everybody, I would say anybody who's really teaching on a high level right now probably learned from Martin DeMott. I'm talking Dave Rosowski, Joe Bild, Susan Mess. I mean, odds are they had interface and had some teaching from Martin. He really came at it at a very different way from Del Close. Martin brought the Players Workshop style, which was one of support. It wasn't antagonistic. It wasn't as cutting. It was absolutely more exploration in the art form. So that's what became the Second City style. And so they basically just lifted up the curriculum from Players Workshop and brought it over to Second City.
Okay. Which
is unfortunate, which caused a bit of a riff, and then eventually said, listen, you can't use Second City in your name anymore. You got to change your name. And it was it was a really unfortunate sort of handling of the entire situation. And then Second City, through the classes, grew and grew and grew. And to the point where Players Workshop, Josephine got a lot older and couldn't run it anymore. And so they kind of shuttered it. But for me, I came through both places. I came through Players Workshop. I worked at Second City. So when I came onto the scene and came back in say around 2008, the problem I had was I didn't have a place I felt like I could send somebody to learn the basics of improv. Second City's still around, the classes are still around, IO is still around, right? But what I felt was Players Workshop offered that ground level, you're not going to get your head handed to you style of classes that Marty taught, that Joe taught, that Viola taught. And that legacy was what I wanted to continue. And so that's why I started again. And not to keep this run-on sentence going, but
please, this is making my job really easy.
comma dash.
Okay.
The thing that kind of pisses me off, that I'm taking issue with. It doesn't piss me off. It's an art form, it is what it is. But the thing I'm taking issue with is the idea that one of the reasons that improvisation thrived, I think in the country, I haven't been able to get the stats to prove it, but Players Workshop was every group that came through Players Workshop, hundreds and hundreds of groups, tens of thousands of students. But every group that came through, after 5 terms, you put on, your 6th term was putting on a show. You put on your graduate show, and effectively you had a 1 to 1.5 hour improv / sketch show that you just produced. Well, where are you going to go with that? You've got this great product now, or at least, product that you enjoy and love. How about that might be a better way of saying it? I'll leave critique out of it. But you have this show now. Where are you going to go? What happened was so many people said, I want to continue doing this show. Let's rent a theater space. Let's start a theater. Let's do this, blah, 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 blah. What that became was this underpinning in Chicago of you could not turn your head without seeing another improv group or another improv theater that was starting up because of this. Improv Olympic, that started at Players Workshop. Sharna took classes there. Dell came over and taught there. They got together. David Shepard came by to try a new art form, right? And got Sharna involved. Joe was the one who put Sharna and David together. They formed IO, and Dell came in and created the hero, or expanded on that idea of a montage type of format. You have UCB. 3 of the founding members of UCB came through Players Workshop. So it really is this foundational place in improvisation that really helps spread the gospel of improv and the acolytes of improv, and created this feeding ground in Chicago. They helped all the guys who went through Improv Institute, which became this huge place in Chicago that people would go to and go, holy cow, that's what you can do with improv. A lot of folks who went over to Annoyance, they came through IO in order to start the Annoyance Theater. Well, IO started at Players Workshop. So you really do have this sort of ground zero place that I don't think is getting the due it deserves on one hand. The other hand is I don't think that there's a lot of places that are teaching in the style of Players Workshop, that have created a curriculum that after this many months, you will be able to walk on stage anywhere in the world and be able to improvise with anybody who's doing it. It's got all of the elements on there, and if you pay attention and you put in the work, you'll be able to do that as well. So that's I have apparently, James, for the love of God, man, for the first question, you really touched on something, which is
struck a nerve.
Softball.
No, I think it's such a great I'm excited to talk more about what that dynamic is, and from a starting point where obviously I got started in improv 2010, so I missed a lot of the history on that in any of the major cities, and obviously Chicago being the original of what modern long form and improv to sketch and is it's some of them, you forget how recent it is, but it's starting to get long enough ago for a lot of people to just take for granted that improv has been around for a long time. But yeah, I imagine in the origin hub of improv that there's a lot of overlap, And it can be tough to kind of like draw lines and give credit in the neatest way, because I also know that, like, I mean, Dell and like Mick Napier were also both teaching it or directing shows at Second City at different points, right? So it's like, and I'm sure that there's like, even now, all sorts of, you know, you can see the same teachers on a roster at different theaters, and so it is kind of like, is it the teachers? Is it the school? Is it the theater? Is it the playing style? Is it the form? Is it the branding? You know, like what?
Yes.
Really, it's kind of tough to like draw the line of where to like give credit, or how, I guess, when does it become kind of a bummer to like not pinpoint, you know, the source of certain things that everybody really loves or enjoys out of the art form.
Well, and I think that's a great call. And I think that if you're doing it correctly, you're not noticing an individual, you're noticing the ensemble, right? If you're doing this art form correctly, working with a group, not solo, obviously, but if you're working with a group or partners, what you realize is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. My thing is that I just want Players Workshop to be recognized as one of the parts. But certainly not, look, every new place that people got together, something new was built, and that has a hand in raising all boats, hopefully, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Michigan, Second City came to Michigan and helped spark a lot of the troops and groups in Michigan as well. And they were in Toronto, and they did a lot of outreach in a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. Second City, LA, you know,
there's one in Vegas for some time, right?
Vegas, right, exactly. Denver. There was one in Edmonton for a while. So yeah, you really can't say one place is responsible for. But what I'm sensitive about, and I really don't want to have happen, is to really lose what should be considered one of the, you know, founding mothers of this form. And women, frankly, have been responsible for the progression, the institutionalization of this form as well. And I don't think that gets enough recognition either. We talk about Dell. We don't talk about the fact that Sharna kept Dell in line and kept the theater open for 30 some years. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Joyce Sloan was the producer of Second City for 30 some years. Viola Spolin's games, you know what I mean? It's all of these, with Joe Forsberg with Players Workshop. It's all of these women who really nurtured this form and gave it life, to use the sort of birthing metaphor.
Yeah, let's get detailed.
Yeah, but I don't think that kind of credit is given either.
Yeah, fair enough. And let me ask you a couple questions out of curiosity of what the Players Workshop was like, because it was mostly, you said it was mostly a school as opposed to like a theater, right? So it's like more of an incubation program and training center. And did it ever have its own stage? I mean, I know you said it was underneath the or like housed by Second City, but did it ever have like a venue in its own right, or does it now?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it up until 1970, it was part of Second City, but it went out on its own completely separate entity with no financial ties or any support from Second City. So for 50 some years, it's been separate from Second City. But yeah, it did. It had a couple of locations. They had a very vibrant children's theater. They did a lot of productions. They produced a lot of productions. They did not have a quote unquote house team, and they didn't do sort of regular. They did not use their space as a regular performance space. So they put people through as their, you know, classes, and then those classes went and performed elsewhere. And that's probably one aspect of the previous model that did not serve them well. I think had they had that performance space, they probably would have done a lot better. You had people going through there like Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, George Wendt, Tim Kazurinsky, Bonnie Hunt, Amy Sedaris, Matt Walsh, Dave Pasquazi. I mean, so you had a lot of nice names go through there. who would have been cool to see in their very early sort of stages on that stage, right? But yeah, they didn't necessarily have a performance space included with the theater. Now, the other thing that did was allow them to keep creating players without necessarily competing with other theaters.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it sounds like much more like a conservatory or a theater company than like a theater venue. You know, like that where the job of a conservatory or a theater company is to like produce and workshop, and then find a place to put it up. But so I imagine like there's a lot of schools and theater companies that might not get as much credit as they deserve, because it's kind of hard to compete with the banner of a theater whose main business is the brick and mortar of the marquee.
Right. Yeah, you don't get to see the the back of house, how the sausage is being made.
Yeah.
Oh, God, it just made me.
and then for like, what would be the major differences between like a Second City review is going to be sketch and scripted, and maybe they'll throw in a standalone improvised scene. It's been a long time since I've seen a Second City show, so I don't know what exactly the format norms are now. But the Players Workshop leads to a show or a showcase, right? And what does a Players Workshop show look like? What's the blend between like what is written, what is improvised?
Yeah, it's probably about a 50-50 blend. There's some written stuff because we teach writing as well, sketch writing, scene writing, storytelling, beginning, middle, and end. How to do that within the context of a scene, the different kinds and styles of theater that can be applied in that way. So we want them to explore that because it's a different form of communication. It's a different form of telling your story. And so that's absolutely a part of the curriculum. So there is that aspect. We also want to explore short form, long form, everything from blackouts to, what we refer to as a collage, which is Second City called it a montage. IO called it a herald. Rose by any other name, but understanding how those forms are played, the different ways that you go about continuing the story of a character, continuing the story of a scene. So if a show right now would probably look like about a 50-50 mix somewhere in there, and then hopefully a couple of games as well.
Okay. And is it like is it sort of a standard? How much of like what a show ends up being is like, okay, well, what do the students want to do? Like, are they more interested in like experimenting with a new, short form format or like, how variable is it from
I would say
show
yes.
to show?
Yeah, I would say yes. And it really would depend on the class. We haven't as yet put on, because of COVID and everything else, we haven't had the chance to really explore the production of shows at the end of their classes for this go round. But what we'd love to have happen is have them come up with, or land on, here's what our show is going to be. Every class's show is going to be a different mix, right? If they came in and said, listen, we love everything, but we just want to do basically an extended collage. Then let's rehearse the heck out of doing that. Let's put on the greatest collage we've ever seen. If a class came in and after they were done with their time, they said, listen, we improvised these scenes and we think we've got a really great sketch show. Then let's put on a really great sketch show for your class, right? Because that's what they really expanded on, and that's where they want to play. That's where they kind of landed.
Okay.
And if a class comes through that says, we love it all, we had fun doing all of this stuff, great. Let's make that stew. Let's put those ingredients together and see what we come up with that. And we take a few weeks to really identify what that is, and then put on a show. Have them put on a show.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that you don't see a ton of it blending. It's usually like a kind of line between like this is sketch, and just the show is written front to back, or like we do long form here, or it's just a short form game show.
Yeah.
And those are great. And there's obvious reasons why, if you gravitate to one of those more than the other, or specialize in them, that the whole show would be that. But it's nice to know that there is ways of blending them, like you can just be like what if we just did a game in the middle, or maybe act 1 is written and act 2 is short form, act 3 is long form, and it's still all connected.
I mean, think about how wonderful that is for the audience, that they're able to see all of these different forms in one place, one setting, one show. I mean, that really is that's all about surprise and delight, that they have the ability to see that. And it also goes to, Second City's thing was, if you don't like what we're doing right now, we're going to change it in a few minutes anyway. Right? There's going to be a group scene to open the show, or 3 blackouts. There's going to be there's going to be a 2-person opening scene. There's going to be a blackout. There's going to be a game. There's going to, so I mean, it really was that sort of idea of that to some extent, right? To some extent. And then they play with that form as well sometimes in terms of the callbacks and what they've been doing with that.
Right.
You brought up a great point, though, that kind of took hold in the late 80s and early 90s was my kung fu is better than your kung fu kind of style of improvisation comparison. And it was the dumbest thing. And I was part of it. I absolutely, you're you guys don't support character like you should. You don't support, and it's the dumbest arguments in the history of improvisation. They really were.
Yeah. Well, it's I just would be so curious to be a part of that phase where improv is this novelty, where we're still not really sure what it is, or if it's going to be its own product, or if it's a means for sketch, and there's no such thing as herald or whatever, it's not on people's minds. We're all just kind of trying to do something similar where we're not using a script and we're figuring it out and seeing if how much fun we can have with it. And it's much more about the exploration. And then at some point, you start building an audience, or like you said, it's word of mouth for just bringing people in and be you got to learn this style. You got to work with Martin, or you got to, see what this thing is, and how it can help you as a performer or actor, or whatever your thing is. And then all of a sudden it's okay, well, there's a little bit of success to this, and we're starting to put names on it, and label well, this is long form, and this is, this is herald, or this is story, improv, or, this is sketch, and I think that just comes from wanting to be precious about and keep growing it, right? Is be okay, but it just has this really bummer side effect where it's when it's just kind of cultivating, it's just so exciting, I would imagine, purely for the sake of it being something new, and then when it's a little less new and we're trying to mold it and shape it and give it longevity, then it's all of a sudden then it becomes a competition. Absolutely.
Which is intrinsically diametrically opposed to the very nature of the form.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've got, on one hand, we want our theaters to survive and thrive, and yet the form itself is all about ensemble, having each other's back, supporting, yes-anding. And so you've got that conflict that's built in there, which, it's interesting, which one of the reasons I think that I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. I think one of the reasons that it's nice that you can't make a living at one theater as a teacher, what happens is naturally you go to many theaters and teach. And so you are effectively becoming the super spreader of the form, right? And that connects everybody's forms because we're all learning from some of the same people, or learning from the people that they learn from, right? As it cascades down. Mm-hmm. So
I think the only thing you're going to get in trouble for saying in there is the word super spreader.
Well, yes, right. But I think that that's actually a key component of the fact that this thing hasn't blown out to this really war on from one faction to another faction, right? Is that there's the people who go around to it. Now, That said, it's the bane of my existence that there aren't more improv. There isn't a way to make a living at this form yet.
Yeah.
Entirely in and of itself. It's just not there yet. There's not a great way to make a living as an actor, period, or as a performer or a writer. Any sort of artist is going to have that issue. But now there's a very big push about getting people paid for what they do and at least a living wage to some degree in theater. That said, Chicago's going through a huge push on this, and it'll be interesting to see how much theater is produced if it can't be funded and paid for. So then it becomes, what does the artist do if they can't do their art?
Yeah,
because they're not getting paid for it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's. I definitely want to segue into talking about the development of like the improv industry and those questions of like how to get paid and when that might happen and how. But I guess it's just on my mind that like I want to have like a sort of disclaimer that like the world of improv is not really like at war with itself. Part of the reason I'm saying this is that last week we had a conversation very similar to like different styles and like the kind of like guards up, or the negative aspects that can arise from improv communities, and they do exist, and it is important to talk about. But I guess I just want to say that like, yeah.
Then let me jump back in here for a second. My description of that was much more about the late 80s, early 90s. What I see now is a much more evolved approach. I'm sure there's still, my yard, your yard type of thing.
Yeah.
But the people who are practicing now, the people who are coming up are so much more intelligent and involved about the sharing of the forms. I'm super excited about what's going on right now for the most part. Like you say, there's always going to be my camp versus your camp. But the way people talk about it now, the way they appreciate the different forms and incorporate the different forms into what they're doing to see what can be made out of it, I think is a incredibly evolved way of thinking about it and utilizing the form. And I think one of the things that the pandemic did was forced all of us to go online and the ability to see what everybody's doing elsewhere. I have been picking up a ton of stuff from Keith Johnstone and Improv, which I really was sheltered from living in Chicago. We didn't have a lot of it. And now I'm working with a ton of folks up in Canada and in on the West Coast. They're ensconced in it. And so I hear their stuff and I'm soaking that in. I'm just really loving all they're doing with it. Another area that really quickly that is become a great area of just this incredible exchange of ideas. And here, go try this, go make money with this, is applied improvisation, which we'll get to later. But that area where people are literally coming together saying, I need help forming a workshop around this. I've got the client already. So there's no sort of, hey, screw you, let me take that client from you. It's much more about, hey, try this. I did this at a workshop, try this. And it's that level of support. I got to tell you, Joe would be loving the kind of communication that's happening now. I mean, we were talking off camera for a little bit just about sort of your background and who you touch in terms of Pat McCartney and Ali Farnakian over at the Pit, and your relations to different theaters in New York, and that kind of thing is fantastic. I honestly, what's happening in the last decade gives me more hope for the art form than I probably had back in the 90s when it was very much, that sort of negative fighting. So
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on it because I realized that like last week we were kind of like, I just didn't want to give people this impression that like, man, improv is imploding. Because it's still like I've been to festivals all over the country and I'm sure you have as well. And when I moved to New York, like I had great confidence that like going to an improv theater was the best place to like meet people and make friends, and it definitely is. Right. And I think that what's important, though, especially as everybody has gotten hit so hard by the pandemic, and theaters included in that, that the way to rebound is to really just embrace and highlight those things that you're talking about, being excited about now, and that are have always been true about the improv community, which is that it's a place to connect with people, and that we just need to find a way to like reduce these like side effects when we suddenly take for granted that these theaters and community are going to balloon forever. Right. And you know, then we get hit with all these closures in the past year, and it's like, damn, this stuff can go away, and like, how do we strengthen it and make it viable and more resistant to crisis like this?
So it's funny you're bringing up something. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but let's say it was, and you're just
sure,
just that freaking good. So I actually have been a part of an organization that we just launched, and the initiative is to do exactly that, is to try and strengthen everybody's ability to make it through these types of scenarios. It's called profitableimprov.com. And what it is it's we did the first round of surveys of theater, improv companies, groups, troupes, everything that we could get our hands on in terms of how are you making money? What are you doing to make money? What's your revenue look like? Are you paying people? What is the state of the improv union right now? Because you're right, those booms and busts, those balloons and contractions happen to every industry. Mm-hmm. What is scary is that because we're an art form, we could very, very easily go the way of jazz, right? And become a very fractional part of the overall music industry that in the 50s was enormous. I mean, it had such a huge hold. And then it took a turn, and it shrank and shrank and shrank and shrank, right? And so, but you talk to a lot of the great rock and roll folks, and they say, yeah, blues and jazz informed my style, and it had, you know, that sort of expansion to it. So it would be a crime and a pity if improv suffered that same thing, mm-hmm. right? And so what Profitable Improv is trying to do is get that information, share it with anybody who participates, and start generating some thinking around, okay, we've heard from some people, this is how they're making money. Are you doing this in your improv company? Are you leveraging, t-shirt sales and things along those lines? Are you doing corporate work? Are you serving other communities with your craft that you can leverage for a revenue stream to support, what you want to do in your theater? So there's a lot of ways to do it, and that especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I became very worried about that. I think that we're going to be okay, but I absolutely wanted to start us talking about, and it could wind up being an improv association, that an improv theater association that literally is everybody sort of sharing best practices, how to do it, and mm-hmm. and everybody gets gets to look at that, gets access to that, so that we can all keep growing.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it is. I think you mentioned the high tide raises all ships analogy earlier, and that's really what it is. And there's room for everything. The my kung fu is better doesn't have to be the way. It's like right. We can just celebrate what we specialize in, and also think it's very cool to like you said, like take a peek at what other people do and be like, wow, I have not thought about doing it that way, or like that's so different from our approach, and still be, thrilled and supportive about it. Yeah.
Yeah. If people go to improv, profitableimprov.com, there's a couple of white papers there. One on how to use social media better for your group. Another one that is all about building up your corporate revenue streams. And you can have access to those if you take it's a survey. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. But the idea being, there's so much space for all of us. There's so much space. It's unbelievable. Like it's there. We don't have to eat each other's lunch to try and survive. There's plenty of other places for us to do it and to grow and be. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I dropped a link there to profitableimprov.com for people to check out.
Oh, cool.
I think that's a great resource and a great mission for people to be aware of. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on like, so let's talk about like applied improv. And I think, one thing I'll mention and want to get your insight on is like, I think it's really great for teachers to do applied improv and corporate workshops because, one, because of the paycheck, but also because like when you bring improv to people who are not necessarily like actors or entertainers, there's something that's like a little bit sort of in the vein of like Viola Spolin, where it was like originally just like, how do we get like just normal people to get back to playing and like break through to something that seems to be missing in like stuffy adult life. And so I think that's interesting. And I also wonder like what the route is to like how doing those types of pursuing that type of industry for improv can also uplift the entertainment for entertainment's sake side of things. You know what I mean?
So James, I feel like you're just putting quarters in me to get me to talk.
It's my job.
You've got like 5 quarters and we got an hour. You're just going to keep on putting a quarter in.
Yep.
Because this is something that's honestly near and dear to my heart. I am all about spreading the gospel of improvisation. I am an evangelizer on if everyone learned improvisation growing up, this would be a better planet. And I honestly and truly believe that in my heart. If we all learned to have each other's back, if we all learned yes and, if we all learned to listen better, this would be a better world without doubt. Jacques Cousteau had a thing where he had a concept where if warring countries sent their children to each other to be raised for 1 year, that would eliminate war on the planet. Fargo actually had an episode where they did that. The warring factions of the mobs traded sons for a year. It didn't work out well in the thing.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Maybe not.
Maybe it won't solve the mafia, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Otherwise, great idea.
Yeah.
So I came up through Second City and originally Players Workshop, and then I was at Second City, and I got to tour and do all the stuff over there. I was a director as well as a performer and a creative director, and I got to help build Second City Communications, which was their corporate arm. Now it's called Second City Works. I believe that there's a couple of important reasons to be doing corporate work, and if you're not doing corporate work, you should be. And by corporate, I simply mean any sort of improv workshops, things along those lines. It doesn't have to be for corporate. It can be for nonprofit organizations, whatever you want to do it for, whomever you want to do it for. Mm-hmm. But doing it outside of the theater, teaching this form to other groups for a lot of great reasons. I think that it does exactly what you say for them. It allows them to play, right? It gets individuals who don't have a relationship with that side of themselves anymore to reconnect with that idea. I think that there's an incredible power in play. It allows you to try things. It lowers your stress. It lowers the stakes so that you can try things, right? As we get older, I mean, I'm in my 50s, and I'll tell you, you do get stuck. Your groove becomes your grave. And in that sense, you stop exploring and trying new things. Improvisation allows people to recognize that they can try new things without necessarily having it cost them their job, their livelihood, their insurance, their health, their safety, right? Mm-hmm. And they can tap into that within themselves. They have that resource. So it's incumbent upon us to share that with those different organizations. Not only that, there's money to be had there. Mm-hmm. There's money for our expertise. And don't make any mistake. This is absolutely an expertise. You can see I've gotten up on the damn soapbox. I'm at the pulpit right now with the Viola Spolin's book in my hand, right? Pounding the Bible. But we absolutely have this incredible craft that we can use. I always look at it as two things. One is in two ways. There's our art and then there's our craft. All right. And
Okay.
when we do workshops, we are using our craft to fund our art. And we're spreading the word of that. We're spreading the information about that, the awareness that this art form exists. Believe it or not, there are people in the corporate world who would love to be a part of this and take this class and learn more about it. And you're doing them the favor of allowing them to experience what that would look like in their everyday lives, right? I don't believe in the work-life balance. I think it's bullshit. I think that it's the same bullshit that the industrialization era foisted upon us, that we have to work this much. Work-life balance, be one way at work and another way at home. It's bullshit. You are one being. Be your authentic self. Improv teaches us that all the time. And I'm sorry, my dog just walked up here, and Gypsy the Wonder Dog, and it's time for a petting. I have to. My arm is below screen, but I don't want to make it weird.
I'm suspicious. Yes. Okay.
But it's incumbent upon us to do that, to spread that gospel to all of those people who need it the most, and those who are stuck in a corporate job or in a situation that they have no sense of play, they are not able to play, and they have to live these two lives, need it. So you can look at it as a calling, but it should be charged for. One of the things in applied improvisation, which I became aware of literally in the past 2 years. I mean, I'm very late to the applied improvisation naming convention, but I've been doing applied improvisation since 1990. Okay. So it's been around. It just didn't have the sort of parameters that I think it's viewed with now. Kat Koppett did a great job of sort of coalescing that into this process, or at least a field that can be explored by other practitioners. But like I say, Second City was doing that back in the 80s and 90s. It's applied improvisation is literally this act of taking what we learn in improvisation and applying it in a broader space. I think that as teachers, we're excellent at doing that, and we can help them to use this in a different way. I will say that Players Workshop has always been open to everybody, not just people who wanted to learn improvisation to be up on stage. We say it's improvisation for life. We don't consider these soft skills. We consider them human skills, right? I mean, it's support, it's listening, it's all of those things. This is the only place, this is the only form where I feel like you get training on how to be a better human, and it's literal. It's you're practicing those skills on stage in front of others, but you're practicing listening better. You're practicing communicating better. You're practicing being in the moment. Other art forms, you can learn them and they can bring you to those places, but you don't actually practice that form, right? If you're painting, it can bring you to that place, but the art form itself is not about that.
Right. You don't achieve the painting through being in the moment necessarily. Yeah,
exactly. And this art form is about that. So Joe would always say that it should be therapeutic without being therapy.
Sure.
And I think there's a great truth to that. So I'm a huge proponent of applied improvisation, doing these kind of workshops for stuff. My book is on that, the Playmaker Mindset. Shameless plug. It is. Here's the other thing. It's not bragging. I've made a great living at it, and I say that not to say I'm doing better than anybody else. I say that to say the door is open. Come through the door. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's here, and literally doing corporate stuff has enabled me to reopen Players Workshop. So it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So yeah, I definitely do want to touch on, let me ask just for because I selfishly am curious. I love timeline and just history and stuff. So what was the break between Players Workshop closing periodically or for a time and then reopening, and what was the process and mission behind getting it started?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that, actually, because I get so wrapped up in it. It closed in 2005,
Okay.
and it had been doing well. It had been doing okay, but Joe had been getting older. I think she was in her mid 80s when it actually closed, and so there was also a little bit of an issue with some internal folks who had been brought in to help it out, and they didn't do that. So not uncommon either, right?
Sure.
So in about 2005, it closed. In 2007, I went back to her and I said, "Listen, I want to reopen it," and to which she was delighted. I got to talk to her in 2007. At the end of 2007 into 2008. In 2008, of course, with the market and everything taking a hit, it wasn't feasible. And then she passed in, I believe, 2010 or 2011. And so at that point, we sort of shelved the idea. I was working with a guy who was also very interested in opening it as well. And anyway, so we kind of shelved it for a little while because it just became a little bit difficult. But at about 2015, I came back to it really feeling like I don't have any place I feel comfortable sending people to learn what I thought was the essence of improv, the basis of improvisation, as well as the art form of improvisation. I could send them to Second City, and I did. I sent people over there. I was there for a decade, but I really felt like Second City was all about getting people up on stage or pursuing some sort of creative path with it, which is totally fine. I'm for that. But for people who don't know necessarily that that's the path they want to take, I've been in those classes and I've been with those people, and they start feeling othered, right? It's like, oh, that they're not looking to be on stage here. I don't want to work with them. I'm not going to give them, I'm not going to give them that effort.
Yeah.
Which to me is the antithesis of the whole thing. I get it because you're also working towards your own personal goals and stuff. I get it. But I wanted to create that space. I wanted that space to exist where people could come in and not feel the pressure that they had to go perform somewhere, that was the end game for them. And so that really kind of picked up my resolve again. The market had recovered by 2015. I had personally recovered by 2015 and thought, okay, let's start going back with this. And it took a couple of years to sort of get it on its legs. And I will say that Eric Forsberg thought, look, it's done and finished. And it took a long time to sort of talk to him about why it's needed and what could be done with it again. Linnea was right on board. And in fact, she's part of our group. She's part of the company. So she is cool. Linnea Forsberg, who also taught it back with Joe and learned it from Joe. So that's excellent. That's just fantastic. I will say that so it took us a while to really move it forward. And so we opened back up in 2018. And then we're doing classes. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. And we, weren't sure if we were strong enough to go virtual. Turns out we were, which was great. Cool. We really kind of like, right? Which I think everybody's response.
Yeah, we know exactly that expression. Yeah.
I love the different, totally, exactly the same, but the different pronunciation of it.
Yeah.
That's but we did. We found our footing virtual, and now we're really enjoying that. And now we're, back to the place of looking for the right space again to start doing live classes. I'd love to. It's aggressive, but I'd love to start doing classes again by the end of August, beginning of September. And I only say it's aggressive because the space selection has gone down considerably here in Chicago, just because a lot of folks got out of the game. So, but that's where we're looking to go with it next.
Okay, awesome. So for right now, people who are interested in the program and the Players Workshop can find you online and currently running online classes, right?
Yeah. Playersworkshoponline.com.
Great.
And we'll sign up for the newsletter, and we're going to continue the virtual classes as well. That's something that we're going to continue doing while we're also doing live classes.
Got it. Awesome. And then before we leave you, tell us about the Playmaker's Mindset, your new book, which came out in the spring. Who is it for? What is it about?
Yeah, it really is. It was written for and meant for folks who are not necessarily practicing improvisation. I combined the thoughts of the process of design thinking, which is my big thing is these two. I'm a two-hand guy.
Got to be able to break it down to two hands.
Two hands.
Can't.
Not two hands, no one gets it.
Yeah.
Or if a third hand comes up, just look away.
Oh.
That ain't right. So I wrote it really for folks who wanted to get back to their creative selves and unleash their creative possibility and potential. Okay. And so I combined design thinking, which is the language of innovation. And I couched it in that because that's a brilliant process for coming up with a bunch of ideas, but it was designed by engineers and it can be a little difficult to get into. So I combined it with improvisation exercises so that it overlaid really nicely. It's like, okay, here's how you open your mind. Here's how you use your open mind. Oh, here are some actionable outcomes that you can now leverage with your new open and creative mind. We talked about this idea of tapping into play. I use that as an acronym, which means you have to align your passion. You have to listen to understand, adapt to the reality around you using creativity, and then yes, and what comes out of that. And that to me is the essence of play that can really come up with, again, these outcomes that can move things forward.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, we will make sure to link to the book and to playersworkshoponline.com. And there's also the link to profitableimprov.com already in the comments. Jeff, thanks. Yes. We'll send you a zip file you can download with a spreadsheet. It's been really, really great talking to you, Jeff. I love talking history, and we really had a conversation about the history and future of improv, which is very exciting. So thanks for joining.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for having me on, James. This was great.
Everybody, we will catch you next time. Please make sure to check out the improvnetwork.org for all those great resources, including there's festival postings. People, we are all fingers crossed and salivating at the idea of getting back to live festivals. So check out festival listings on the website as well. And we'll catch you next time on the Improv Network podcast. Bye.